The enormous Kalinin K-7 was really strange. Interwar years saw the first attempts to create massive carriers that could carry hundreds of passengers in the air. Between the mid-1920s and the start of World War II, aircraft creators often entertained themselves by inventing things that had no business flying in the sky. The one and only Konstantin Kalinin, born in 1887, participated in the Imperial Russian Air Force throughout World War I. He joined the Bolsheviks and continued aviation designing until 1925. He created the K-4 and K-5 high-wing monoplane airliners in the late 1920s. Although simple, both ideas were effective and very impactful, yet still this whole time he was working on something far more grand. Kalinin believed he could sell his design to Soviet government officials. He worried that it would contradict party egalitarianism, which may be disastrous with a paranoid Stalin in charge. However, he persisted, and it was agreed that a massive, imposing aircraft may have great propaganda value if it functioned like planned. Kalinin also suggested using the plane as a bomber to sweeten the bargain, and the administration agreed. The K-7 experimental prototype was ready for testing by mid-1933, after approximately 2 years of work. After completion, everyone saw the project's potential. The K-7 was 92 feet long, 40 feet tall, and 174 feet wide. That's twice the average wingspan of typical commercial airliners at the time. The K-7's great wing, at 4,887 square feet, was the largest elliptical wing ever built. A single tail would not have been powerful enough to support an aircraft of this size. Thus, the K-7 was one of the first major twin-boom aircraft. The horizontal tail surface was as wide as a large monoplane fighter's wingspan. The wings were huge, and the K-7's empty weight of 24,400 kilograms was as heavy as almost 2.5 fully laden Douglas DC-3 airliners. This weight would grow even more when the K-7 carried its payload. It could carry 120 passengers, or 7,000 kilograms of freight in civilian mode, which was outstanding at the time. The aircraft's 2.3-meter wing could hold as many passengers and even had forward-facing viewing windows, which would have been impressive when airborne. The K-7 needed more than the average landing gear to support its massive heft during takeoff and landing. 2 gigantic undercarriage sponsons were built and joined to the main airframe by multiple steel connectors. The sponsons had 2 connecting tubes. The back tube had a ladder, while the forward tube had a tiny stairway that led to the wing for passengers and crew to enter. Each landing sponson had 3 big wheels, 1 ahead and 2 aft. The pilot and command crew were situated in a central gondola with a large window frame for vision. The K-7 featured a big crew of 19 to 13 personnel. It was a 2-tier gondola, meaning the pilot and co-pilot sat at the top, and the lowest tier had a navigator and bombardier, depending on arrangement. Beyond the basics, information about this aircraft is scarce, therefore I can only infer that the lower level was used for those objectives. The K-7 prototype was military, not civilian, as Kalinin had envisioned. Many of the 19 crew members would be gunners in this configuration. 1 gunner position was in the nose, 1 on each tail boom, 2 on the tail, and 2 each on the landing sponsons, 1 facing forward and 1 looking aft. By early 1930 standards, the K-7 featured considerable defensive weaponry. It had at least 8 7.62mm machine guns and 3 20mm cannons. To my knowledge, the cannons were located in the nose, 2 in the front of the landing gear, while the machine guns were in the central and rear locations. Gun for gun, since most bombers at that period lacked cannons, the K-7's weaponry and size made it a dangerous opponent. The military layout replaced passenger compartments with integrated bomb bays. The K-7 could carry 19,000 kilograms of bombs at full capacity, surpassing any other aircraft at the time and in the future. For comparison, the B-17 could carry 7,800 kilograms and the B-29 10,000 kilograms, excluding Grand Slam bombs. To move this massive bulk, the K-7 initially had 6 47-litre Mikulin AM34 V12 engines with 750 horsepower apiece. They lived in 3 tiny cells on the leading edge of the wing, either side of the cockpit. 2 more engines were joined to operate a single propeller in a pusher position at the back of the aircraft between the tail booms because 6 engines weren't enough. A 140 mph top speed and 13,000 foot surface ceiling were designed for the aircraft. The K-7 first flew on August 11, 1933. Unfortunately, the rear-facing engine produced major problems for the K-7. It was unstable on the first test flight. Due to frighteningly significant tailboom vibrations, the airframe seemed to be resonating with the engine's frequency, and the pusher propeller at the back added turbulence. Shortening tailbooms and welding on steel reinforcing plates was the sole remedy in the 1930s, because the relationship between natural frequencies of structures and vibrations was unknown. After these improvements, the aircraft flew numerous more tests. Both technologically and productionally, it was a propaganda success. The K-7 was the first large aeroplane made using Soviet steel. All others were imported. Russian daily news Pravda called it a critical political success that showed the new Soviet state was becoming a self-sufficient industrial power. Unfortunately, victory was brief. After this, the K-7 took off for the last time on November 21, 1933. After about 350 feet, the right tailboom separated from the plane without lateral stability and entered a powered dive, crashing into the ground at almost full power, killing 15 of the 20 people on board and 1 on the ground. There are no images or details of the crash, likely due to Stalinist secrecy in Soviet media. Some believe that engine resonance issues were not fully resolved, causing the airframe to fail. This explanation sounds plausible and matches crash witness testimonies. Sabotage theory exists too. Its direct competitor, the Tupolev Ant-20, was inspired by the K-7. The aviation press suspected the large corporation sabotaged its tiny but impressive competitor. However, the true path is likely undiscovered. 2 further K-7s were purchased, but the project was cancelled and the prototypes demolished in 1935. Despite designing subsequent aircraft, Konstantin Kalinin never eclipsed his greatest design. In 1938, Stalin executed him as an enemy of the state after he had grown unpopular with him by the late 1930s. The K-7 is an aeroplane we don't know much about, but there's a big misconception surrounding it that I feel the duty to address now. The K-7 was falsely rumoured to be created for carrying Navy warship-style heavy weapons, according to rumours online. There's even a Photoshop graphic easily available on Google that started this. This insane idea has gained traction in some forums. However, the truth is that this design is absurd and unrealistic. One of the 2 turrets would be enough to ground the aircraft and prevent it from taking off. But the recoil of firing 6 250mm guns on an airframe like this would cause catastrophic structural failure after the first discharge. Due to its size, the K-7 may not be able to carry its 19-ton bomb load. It's feasible to pack that weight of bombs in the aircraft, but many doubt it can lift them off the ground. The K-7 struggled in test flights with only a few extra tons, let alone 19 tons. Like the guy who developed it, many of this aircraft's intel was destroyed in the purges. Only a few grainy images and sketches remain, along with all that this huge aircraft flew 30 years after the Wright brothers' first flight.